to say what I really enjoy doing is I want to I like to build leaders and help leaders create the kind of companies where people enjoy the work that they're doing. Where when people, how many of you have worked for a boss, or in a company where you really felt connected to the mission? You enjoy coming to work every day. Okay. And how many of you have had the opposite, where you're working in a company where you're clocking in and clocking out, and and so think about how much effort you're willing to put in those two different scenarios, right? It is a strategy where you can become a more profitable company if you create the kind of culture where people enjoy coming to work. I mean, that's something certainly out in California. They're a little bit more progressive thinking about those sorts of things in a lot of cases. But that's really something to think about, is when you're trying to start a business, what kind of culture are you creating? And so that's actually the company that my dad started, was to help leaders build cultures where people felt engaged in the work that they're doing. It's what we call discretionary effort, right? Like if you're just clocking in and clocking out every day and trying to do the bare minimum to not get noticed and get by, that's bare minimum, right? And then there's this whole other level of effort that people would be willing to put in that you don't even have to pay them any extra for. Like you're already paying their wages, right? And they're excited to work harder when they feel connected to the work that they're doing. And so what I wanted to talk a little bit with you about was this concept called conscious capitalism, which is really all about these companies that they have more of a purpose beyond just making profit, and they care for all of these stakeholders rather than prioritizing the stockholders and always chasing the bottom line, and they end up being more successful in the long run. So kind of big picture, over the last couple hundred years, there was a time, in the agricultural age, where the way that you set yourself apart, the way that you made money, compared to your competitors, was like manpower, right? If you're on a farm, who can plow the fields the fastest? That's how you can make more money. And then kind of the Industrial Revolution comes, and it's how can we produce as many products as possible with as few of defects as possible, and just try to build as many high quality, but just churn them out as many widgets as possible. And now a lot of people would say we're in this kind of information age where it's a knowledge worker. How do we have knowledge workers? We want to have smart people in our companies. That's how we set ourselves apart. But what I'd like to contend is that we're actually kind of growing out of the information age and into this cultural capital consciousness age where it's really the companies that have the best cultures. Those are the ones that set themselves apart. That is how you create. Everybody familiar with the term competitive advantage? It's like how you set yourself apart from your competitors, right? So the new frontier of competitive advantage, in my opinion, but the studies bear this out, is that culture that you're creating. So there's a lot of different ways you can measure culture. One of them is the best places to work. Like Wegmans here locally, they've been on the best companies to work for list many times. It's one of our clients, so we work with. They've been top 10 and hit number 1 year of the best companies to work for. So, this is a survey that they survey all their employees to get an idea of what do the employees really think? Not what are the plaque on the wall with the values and the mission statement or on the website, but what do people actually really feel? And so the people that score highest on this, they're named, they're in the Forbes magazine, or Fortune rather, best companies to work for. And the companies that made this list, over the course from 2002 to 2012, so over 10 years, they made 4 times more money than the market average. So they invest in their culture where, sometimes those investments it can be expensive to maybe give better, parental leave policies, or, give your people more vacation days, or, like Google is well known for all the, perks that they'll throw at you and the free food and all these sorts of things,
laundry.
Right? But they end up...
Laundry? Yeah, I used to do laundry there.
Wow. So Google, they've set themselves apart by their culture. And so not only thinking about the employees that they currently have and how much harder they're willing to work, but also think about how that's going to help you attract the best employees. It's going to make people stick around longer. the longer that they're there and learning, it takes a long time when you've got a new employee to make them, actually a profitable contributing member of the company, right? So it reduces turnover. So there's a lot of things that happen, but the ultimate thing that happens is that they end up being more successful. So there's another term that I wanted to introduce you to that kind of takes as best companies to work for and takes it even to another level, and it's called conscious capitalism. And this is an international movement. It is I'm not sure if they have any chapters in Africa, but I know that they are all over India, they're all over South America, they're all over the US and Europe. And so there's maybe 50 or so chapters, but it's an international movement. It started in 2007. There's a book called Firms of Endearment, and it looked at these companies, including the Googles and the Southwest Airlines, and Wegmans was on there, a local company, and said, what is it that sets these companies apart? These are some of the most well-respected, admired companies. What sets them apart? And he came up with these 4 key tenets that I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about when you're thinking about both, whatever you all are trying to create, but then also the businesses that you're going to try to help start. Is these companies, they have a purpose beyond just making profits. So Ed Freeman is quoted in the book. He says, "We need red blood cells to live, but the purpose of life is more than to make red blood cells," right? Like, you don't want on your obituary, like, "Oh, this person made the most red blood cells, wonderful," right? That's not something to be proud of. Similarly, for a company, you need profits to survive, right? You got to keep the lights on, you got to pay the bills, you want it to be sustainable, certainly, but the purpose of the company should go beyond that. Now, think about if your only purpose as a company is to make money. It's going to be pretty hard to inspire your employees to do any more than just that baseline work, of just earning their paycheck, right? Whereas if you have a purpose beyond profits, if you are trying to have a positive impact on your local community or the global community, or you're, trying to do something sustainability and, for the climate, all those sorts of things, you have some kind of purpose beyond just let's make as much money as possible. That was a key component of these companies. They also had a stakeholder orientation. So think about in your companies all the different stakeholders that you might have. Yes, there's the stockholders. They're an important one, but too often they get prioritized over all the rest, right? There's customers, there's the community, there's your employees, there's the suppliers and, the other businesses that you work with. There's the planet and the environment itself. And really, businesses need to recognize, there's this thing called negative externalities where, even though it doesn't show up on the balance sheet, there might be negative things that a company is doing. Like, for example, like a cigarette company, right? Like it costs more to the society than the cost of those cigarettes, because the society then has to pay for the healthcare bills of all the negative, downstream impacts of that. So similarly, when you're thinking about a company and your stakeholder orientation, let's not just do what's best for the stockholders, but how can we do what's best, balance the needs of the customers, the community, the employees, the environment, all of those stakeholders, because really, in the short term, we could probably, make a little bit more profit or grow a little bit faster by just prioritizing the stockholders. But in the long term, these companies that have this whole ecosystem around them, that, the customers become really loyal. The employees stick around longer. The community wants to see you succeed because of the way that you're giving back in the community. And so they end up being more resilient and more successful in the long term. They have conscious culture. So Peter Drucker says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. You can put together your strategic plan. If you've ever been in a company, they probably have their 5-year goals or their 3-year or 5-year, 10-year strategic plan, right? And then usually about, I don't know, if you're lucky, 6 months into that strategic plan, the economy changed, or your competitors did something you weren't expecting, or something happened in the community that throws those plans out the window, right? Not to say that it's not worth planning and having goals and things, but you need to be adaptable. And that's why culture eats strategy for breakfast, is because your culture is all those little interactions, like how do people treat each other in this company? Are people happy and energized coming into work? How does the community want to support this company? And so culture eats strategy for breakfast, because I don't know if you've ever heard. Do you know of Mike Tyson? He's kind of old now, but Mike Tyson, a boxer, said that everybody's got a plan, until you get punched in the face. So you know, just like these companies that put their 6-year strategic plan together, you know, you're the boxer, you've got your plan in the ring, okay, here's what I'm going to do, here's his strengths and weaknesses. Then you get punched, and then it's like, whoa, and then you have to just be adaptable. You have to dip and dive and duck and dodge and you know, throw punches where you can, but your plan is never going to work out exactly as you were hoping for. And so being able to have the right culture to support what you're trying to do is even more important than having, you know, that strategy or even like, you know, it can be effective to put a business plan together as an entrepreneur, but we all know that like those projections that we put together of like, here's how much revenue we're going to have, you're guessing, you know, you're pulling things out of thin air, right? So it's important to think through and put the plan together, but it's more important to have the culture that's going to be adaptable. The last piece is conscious leadership. And this, John Mackey, he's the founder of Whole Foods, which is another one of the companies mentioned. And he says that leaders have to grow for the business to grow. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you aren't individually working on how am I personally growing, how am I personally developing, you know, there's all different ways you can think about that, whether that's what kind of skills, you know, do I need to learn a little bit about accounting, or do I need to learn a little bit about business development, or do I need to work on building my network, you know, some of those things. And then there's some more broad skills. Like, has anyone ever heard of the term emotional intelligence? Yeah. So emotional intelligence, right? Like there's a certain level of technical ability that you need to have. You know, you need to maybe know how to do some coding online, right? Or you know, do HTML or do those sorts of things for your business, right? There's certain technical things that you need to know. But the emotional intelligence is actually, they found that 90% of the difference between the average and the star performers was due to emotional intelligence. Because, you know, the technical skills, being able to, like if you want to get a job at Google, being able to write code is like just to get in the door, right? So that'll get you into be, okay, yeah, I've got the job, or no matter what it is, you know, even if it's, you know, you're working at a you know, hair salon, right? Like you need to learn how to cut hair. That's a technical skill, but that's just to get you in the door. What sets people apart of the average to the highest performance is emotional intelligence, and that's how I'm dealing with my own stress. You know, am I when I get angry, am I taking that out on other people? Because pretty quickly, when you're talking about culture and you're talking about the environment that you're creating, if you can't handle your own stress, if you're not, you know, other elements of conscious leadership, how are you empowering your employees, like helping them grow? Psychological safety is actually the number one thing that Google found that sets their high-performing teams apart, is when there's a sense of psychological safety where you feel like it's okay to fail every once in a while. It's okay to, you know, if you feel like it's okay to fail, you're going to throw out some crazy ideas, and you're going to, maybe some of them will work, maybe some of them won't, but that's how they innovate. That's how they grow. Whereas if it's not safe to do that, you're probably going to hold those things to yourself. You're not going to go outside the lines. You're not going to you know, talk about those sorts of things. You're not going to try anything new, and you're not going to innovate, and you're going to get left behind. So these conscious leaders really have to create that kind of culture. And these two elements especially, like we work a lot at Accelerate on helping companies connect with their purpose and you know, their values, and making it not just that plaque on the wall of here's what we say we do, but actually making people feel it and live it. But there's a lot of elements of that we work on in terms of helping leaders understand their own leadership and communication style. You know, has anyone ever heard of the golden rule? Treat others the way that you want to be treated, right? So we actually, I learned that probably in kindergarten, if not sooner, maybe from my parents. So with all due respect to my parents and with all due respect to my kindergarten teacher, we throw out the golden rule and we talk about the platinum rule instead. And the reason is that we are all different. We have different needs. We have different expectations. We have different communication styles. Some of us, you know, are really energetic and outgoing and you know, big picture thinkers. And some people may be more, you know, into the details. And some people maybe like to juggle a lot of things and multitask and do a lot of different projects. Some people are, you know, really great at just focusing in. And so we have a lot of assessment tools, which might be one of the ways that I could help in the future is, you know, helping every individual understand their own leadership and communication style and how it's different than the other people. And so rather than the golden rule of treat others the way that you want to be treated, it's treat them the way that they want to be treated. But first, that's how do you have the conversation of here are my needs, here are my expectations, here's my style, and what are yours? And then where can we, you know, meet in the middle? What kind of commitments and agreements can we make to each other? Because, you know as well as I do that diversity creates so much strength, but it can also make communication difficult, right? Because maybe I have different experiences, or maybe it's even just I have a different language, right? Or different culture, all those sorts of things. And when you bring those people in to all work in one room, there's so much potential because everybody brings different perspectives and different backgrounds and different experiences and may be able to suggest something new or different or not do it the way it's always been done, right? In this company or in this community. And at the same time, there can be some friction, there can be misunderstandings, there can be communication barriers, and so that could be an interesting way that we might be able to work together. Is I can help you all talk a little bit about diversity of communication styles just based on kind of human nature, and then when you could pair that up with kind of the cultural competence in those elements of diversity. I think that could be a great way to help some of these, whether it's entrepreneurs that are just trying to get out in the community and or build their network, as you were talking about, or whether they're trying to put together like a founding team for their growing company and they want to make sure that everybody on their team is on the same page and is learning from each other, knows how to work together and talk together. Because what they found, like I told you with the best companies to work for, they beat the S&P 500 by 4 times over 10 years. These conscious capitalism companies, they beat the S&P 500 by 10 times over 10 years. So they were far more financially successful, ironically, by not just focusing on the bottom line. Because yes, in the short term, there might be some things that you do that maybe you have to sacrifice your short-term profits for your culture, or maybe you invest more into your leaders, but you see a huge ROI from that. And that's why, like I said at the beginning, cultural capital is a new frontier of competitive advantage. That is how these companies are setting themselves apart and being more successful. And so that's the kind of companies that we try to build, that I do at Accelerate, but we also have a local chapter of Conscious Capitalism. Some of you that don't live, I know that there's several, there's one in the Bay Area, there's Conscious Capitalism chapters out there that might be worth connecting with. Because what we said was, Wegmans was one of the companies mentioned in the original book. We have a Costco now, we have some Starbucks, and we have Trader Joe's is another company mentioned. But there's a lot of companies locally that are doing great work that would probably qualify for this, but they're never going to get that national recognition in an international book, right? There's a lot of small companies that could be just like 5 or 10 people that are doing incredible, fascinating work. Are you all familiar? Have you heard of B Corps? There's another organization that does another similar kind of measurement tool. It's called B Corps, or benefit corporations. And so what they do is they actually work with organizations to measure, how do you do on the triple bottom line of not only your profit bottom line, but also your people and the impact you're having on the planet. And being able to, and there's actually kind of like you can get like an organic certification on your produce. There's a B Corp certification for companies that measure up in these different areas. So that's another, in addition to conscious capitalism, in addition to best companies to work for, there's B Corps. There's all these different measurement tools because one of the oldest adages of business is you have to measure what matters, right? Once you measure these things, you can improve them. But if the only measurement you have is the bottom line, then that's what companies are going to focus on. So how can you put some other measurements of the culture or other things that are important so that you're measuring those as well? And that's a really important element of this conscious capitalism. Like there's a B Corp, the first B Corp in New York State, first certified B Corp, is an organization called Grayston Bakery. We brought the CEO of Grayston Bakery up to Rochester last year for our Conscious Capitalism conference. And they have an open hiring policy, which means that there are no interviews, there are no background checks, there are no language requirements, you don't have to show any documents. Basically, you show up, you write your name on the waiting list, and when your name gets to the top of the list when they're hiring again, you're hired.
Interesting.
It is a bakery that is down in Yonkers, New York, so outside of New York City, and they have it sounds crazy, right? Like nobody's doing it. They've been doing this for 30 years,
pick up out of it.
30 years.
They have people from all over the world.
So they get a lot of people that are, people that, for example, maybe they have a criminal record and they're typically disenfranchised, or maybe they're, refugees, or, they don't have some of the language skills, or they're, any of those sorts of things. So they have had to, over the years, again, they've been doing this for 30 years, and it's not a nonprofit, it is a business. You may not have heard of Grayson Bakery, but who's ever had Ben & Jerry's ice cream? Come on.
Yeah.
If you ever had Ben & Jerry's ice cream, any of the brownies in Ben & Jerry's ice cream was baked by Grayson Bakery. So they are a company that they have found ways. Basically, they have a great quote, actually, that may be relevant to you all. They say, "We don't hire people to bake brownies. We bake brownies to hire people." So literally, like, their business, what they're trying to do is not just, we want to make as much money as possible, and oh yeah, when we need to hire, we will. It's, the only reason we're doing this baking is because we want to give people jobs, and we want to, especially people who maybe don't have opportunities for jobs elsewhere, don't have the skills necessary, or they have, because of their background, they aren't able to get jobs elsewhere. And so the only reason they want to grow is so that they can hire more people. And so this company, Grayson Baker, they're the first B Corp in New York State, and they have now another thing maybe worth, if any of you are down in Yonkers, or traveling or something, maybe worth going to check it out. Or I'm sure the CEO, I'd be happy to connect you with him. But they have now started what they're calling a center for open hiring. So they've been doing this for 30 years, and they basically said, we've learned a lot, we've struggled a lot over the years, but now we've figured it out pretty well. And now we want to take everything that we've learned, bless you, and we want to help other companies try open hiring. So we actually have a company locally, actually one of my clients runs a company called CleanCraft. It's a commercial cleaning company. It's an industry where people aren't typically, they don't feel cared for typically. They're working overnights a lot of times, cleaning office buildings and things like that. And it can be difficult work. But this guy, we've been working with him on not only growing himself as a leader, but building the kind of culture where people are, excited to come to work. And he works with people all over, the spectrum in terms of, their experience level and, some of their backgrounds and things like that. And he's been able to outcompete other companies. He actually, he has people that, it's an industry with notoriously high turnover. He's got way below the industry average in turnover. And he's got more reliable employees. He's got employees that care more, that aren't just clocking in and clocking out, but are trying to do their best and do the best cleaning and, do the best for their clients. And now he's actually, when he bids on projects, he can bid a higher price than some of his competitors, but people will still take him because they know not only that he treats his employees well, but also that they're going to do a better job because they feel cared for, because they've been around longer. They're not just the clock in, clock out kind of people that are, quitting and maybe only staying for a couple months and those sorts of things. And so we've got him to sign on to, he's going to be the pilot of this open hiring idea in Rochester.
You just changed the name, right?
Ty Hookway is his name, but the company is called CleanCraft.
You changed the name of the company, right?
It used to be Shining Star.
Yeah, I worked for a big long time
No
ago.
kidding. So you know Ty?
Yeah.
No kidding. Small world. So he's
It's
been.
on Buffalo Road.
What's that? Yeah, on Buffalo Road. Yep. Yeah. CleanCraft. And so they're now, that might be again another person to start talking to, because if you all have people who maybe they're not quite ready to start a company, but they do want a good job that's that's decent paying, that doesn't care about what their background or if they have a not a great past or anything like that, that they'll give them a chance and they can get a job there. And that's so we're gonna have open hiring in Rochester as well. So like that could be another thing when people are first just coming to Rochester, and you all based on your networks and things might hear about whether it's refugees or people migrating or whatever it is that come here, and there could be the employment track through more open hiring, and there could be like the entrepreneurship track if people are ready and willing and able to start a business. So those are some of the things that are going on, and I know I've thrown so many different people and organizations and things at you, so I'll write a follow-up email or something, and you can send it along to everybody else that can kind of the websites, and then when you look at all the websites of these different organizations, if there's people you want to connect to, I'd be happy to kind of make any email introductions or grab coffee with them or something like that. But hopefully that's a little bit helpful. And then, like I said, when you see some of the other things out there, and I'd be interested to know too, when we have our Venture Jobs Foundation, so they're doing impact investing, and as well as these accelerator programs, right? They modeled themselves off of, and I don't know, I'll have to look, but they're part of an organization. Co-Starters is like an accelerator for, you typically hear about accelerator programs for like these high-tech, high-growth kind of companies. Co-Starters is part of that, but they basically took their typical curriculum and made it more suitable for like the neighborhood entrepreneur that wants to start a coffee shop or wants to start a barber shop or anything like that, something that they can start in their neighborhood without a ton of capital to get started. So they took this kind of typical accelerator program and they made a more suitable version for these kinds of entrepreneurs. And so that is like this platform that they're using. And I know that Jacksonville has it. There's one in Baltimore. There's one in Durham. Those are some of the people that came to train us on how to run the program. But I know that there's more, so you can also check around and see if there's other similar programs in your communities. Any other questions or ways that I can be helpful? Like I said, we'll actually hear, you've got all the information.